When many people turn to Joshua chapter 12, the first thing they see is a long list of place names and kings. The Valley of Arnon, Mount Hermon, the king of Jericho, the king of Jerusalem, the king of Lachish, the king of Megiddo. It is easy to feel that this chapter is nothing more than a dense list of names. Naturally, people may wonder, why does Scripture record something that looks like a catalog? What do these names have to do with people today? Yet within this seemingly dry record, Scripture reveals something powerful. God's promises are never abstract. He fulfills them within real history, step by step. The chapter does not begin with Joshua. Instead, it first takes us back to the time of Moses. The Bible tells us that the Israelites defeated two kings east of the Jordan River toward the sunrise, Sihon king of the Amorites and Og king of Bashan. This is not simply a historical reminder. It is telling us something important. God's work does not begin suddenly. Even before Israel entered Canaan, God had already begun to prepare the way. Moses defeated two powerful kings east of the Jordan, and later Joshua led the people west of the Jordan to continue the battles. Together, these events form a single line of history. God is not a God who says something today and forgets it tomorrow. His promises unfold and are fulfilled step by step. The passage then describes the boundaries of the land, from the Valley of Arnon to Mount Hermon, from the Sea of Kinnereth to the Salt Sea, from the Arabah to the slopes of Pisgah. These descriptions may sound like lines on a map, but Scripture records them for a reason. God's promises are not vague. He does not simply say, "I will bless you somehow," and leave it undefined. He describes the land clearly, because what he gives is not an illusion, but a real inheritance. One figure mentioned in the passage stands out in particular: Og king of Bashan. Scripture says he was one of the remaining Rephaim, a people known in ancient times as giants. In other words, the Israelites were not facing small or weak nations. They were confronting formidable powers, even kings among the giants. If one looks only at human strength, Israel's victory would seem almost impossible. Yet Scripture records a simple but astonishing reality. God enabled his people to defeat these kings. This was not merely a military success. It was the work of God himself. The passage then tells us that the land was given to the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. This reminds us of another truth. God's promise does not stop on the battlefield. It ultimately settles into the daily lives of his people. Land meant home, rest, farming, and ordinary life. God led his people through battle so that they might finally live in peace. The narrative then moves to the west side of the Jordan. Under Joshua's leadership, Israel defeated a series of kings. Scripture begins listing them one by one: the king of Jericho, the king of Ai, the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Lachish, the king of Megiddo, the king of Hazor, and many others. Finally, the text says 31 kings in all. To some readers, it may appear to be nothing more than a long list, but when placed within the larger story of the Bible, the picture becomes remarkable. One by one, powers that once seemed unshakable fell in the course of history. These city-states each had their own rulers and authority. They appeared independent and powerful. Yet before God, they became only names recorded in history. Scripture is not glorifying war. It is showing how God fulfilled what he had promised centuries earlier to Abraham. "I will give this land to your offspring." Hundreds of years later, that promise became visible in the days of Joshua. But the Bible does not stop there. In fact, the entire Scripture points forward to something greater. Joshua led the people into the land, but the rest he gave was temporary. Centuries later, Israel would still fall into sin, face exile, and be scattered. This reveals something deeper. Humanity needs more than a new land. We need new hearts. That is why the Bible ultimately points to another figure whose name is the same as Joshua in meaning: Jesus. The name Joshua means "the Lord saves," and Jesus is the Greek form of that same name. Joshua led Israel to victory over earthly kings. Jesus came to defeat a deeper enemy: sin, death, and the power of darkness. The 31 kings of Canaan belong to history, but the true kings often ruling in the human heart are pride, self-rule, and sin. Jesus came not merely to redraw a map of kingdoms, but to transform the human heart. So when we read this chapter again, we realize that it is not a dull list at all. It is a strong declaration. History is not random. God governs history, and he is leading it toward his redemption. The names of those kings are now almost forgotten, but the promise of God continues to this day. And the passage quietly brings us to an honest question that each person must face. In the battles of life, whom do we rely on? The kings of old trusted in their walls, armies, and horses. Yet all of those powers eventually vanished. Scripture shows us that true salvation does not come from human strength but from God. For this reason, Jesus came into the world, not to establish another earthly kingdom, but to call people back to God, so that they may receive true life and lasting rest.